The game begins with white playing knight to f3. Black responds pawn to d5. White continues with pawn to e3. Black develops knight to f6. White plays pawn to b3. Black develops bishop to f5. Already we see the contours of the Zukertort system of the Réti opening, a flexible setup where white aims for a solid structure and later expansion on the queenside, while black quickly places the bishop outside the pawn chain to exert pressure. White plays bishop to e2. Black pushes pawn to h6. White develops bishop to a3. Black answers with knight to d7. White castles kingside. Black plays pawn to e6. White exchanges with bishop captures knight on f8. Black recaptures with knight to f8. White plays pawn to c4. Black retreats knight to d7. White develops knight to c3. Black castles kingside. At this stage, white is building pressure on the center and queenside, while black maintains a compact formation, ready to counterattack. White plays pawn captures pawn on d5. Black recaptures with pawn to d5. White pushes pawn to b4. Black answers pawn to c6. White develops knight to d4. Black plays bishop to h7. White places queen to b3. Black develops knight to e5. White pushes pawn to a4. Black responds rook to c8. White advances pawn to a5. Black plays pawn to b6. White develops knight to f3. Black exchanges knight captures knight on f3. White recaptures with bishop to f3. Black pushes pawn to d4. White retreats knight to e2. Black captures pawn on e3 with pawn. White recaptures pawn with pawn to e3. Black plays bishop to e4. White places rook to d1. Black moves queen to e7. White exchanges bishop captures knight on e4. Black recaptures with knight to e4. White pushes pawn to a captures b6. Black recaptures with pawn to b6. White develops knight to c3. Black places rook to d8. White exchanges knight captures knight on e4. Black recaptures with queen captures knight on e4. White plays pawn to h3. Black pushes pawn to c5. White exchanges rook captures rook on d8. Black recaptures rook with rook to d8. White pushes pawn to b captures c5. Black recaptures pawn with pawn to c5. White develops rook to c1. Black places queen to e5. White moves queen to c2. Black places rook to d5. White pushes pawn to g3. Black pushes pawn to f5. White develops king to g2. Black moves king to h7. White places queen to c4. Black places queen to d6. White pushes pawn to e4. Black places rook to e5. White exchanges pawn captures pawn on f5. Black recaptures rook captures pawn on f5. White places queen to e4. Black places queen to d5. White exchanges queen captures queen on d5. Black recaptures rook captures queen on d5. White develops king to f3. Black moves king to g6. White develops king to e4. Black places rook to d4 check. White moves king to e3. Black places rook to d5. White develops king to e4. Black places rook to d4 check. White moves king to e3. Black places rook to d5. White develops king to e4. Black places rook to d4 check. And the game is agreed drawn. Throughout the game, white aimed for queenside expansion and central control, while black countered with solid defensive moves and timely exchanges. The middle game showed the importance of piece activity and the balance between attack and defense. Beginners should learn from this game that controlling the center, developing pieces efficiently, and knowing when to exchange are crucial skills. They should also notice how both players avoided unnecessary risks and steered the game toward a balanced endgame where neither side could make progress. Thank you for watching this analysis. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more explained games, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss anything.